The Forsaken Shogun by Juran Hisao. Shirazuno Mori Forest.
It was mid-October, and autumn was already far advanced. Near Shirazuno Mori Forest at Yawata, on the Funabashi Road, a masterless samurai came strolling along, kicking up dust as casually as though he were on his way to the bathhouse. He wore an old-fashioned lined kimono of black habiti silk directly against his skin, with no undergarment beneath it. 2 swords in scuffed and peeling scabbards hung low behind him, and cheap straw sandals covered his feet. He was an incorrigible drifter by nature. Though already 28, he had no occupation whatever. He idled in the servants' quarters of one residence after another and associated only with palanquin bearers, stable hands, and men of that sort. His uncle Shobo, at his wit's end, bought him a post in the Kofu garrison. But Kofu was nothing but mountains, and imposing though the title of garrison retainer sounded, the Tokugawa age was already nearing its end. The garrison was filled with the second and third sons of direct shogunal retainers who had exhausted their means in Edo, raffish samurai who could sing popular ballads and the narrative music called Kato Bushi like professionals but could scarcely tell a sword's edge from its back. He could be as raffish as any of them, but their affectations, shallowness, and insufferable airs disgusted him. He fled Kofu and set out over Sasago Pass for Edo, then suddenly changed his mind and veered off toward Kazusa. For half a year he lazed about the houses of local bosses in Kisarazu and Tomioka. Then, seized without warning by a longing for Edo, he left Tomioka the day before yesterday. This time it seemed he might actually reach the city without another detour. With both hands tucked inside his robe and his sleeves stirring in the wind, he was ambling past Shirazuno Mori when a voice called from the dim woods. "Sir Samurai, Sir Samurai." The forest was not particularly deep, but tradition held that anyone who entered it would incur a curse. Villagers and travelers alike gave it a wide berth. No one had set foot inside for years. Fallen leaves lay in deep drifts, and owls began hooting even before sunset. Senba Ago Juro himself believed that he had severed all ties with the samurai life. In his worn kimono and cheap straw sandals, he certainly did not look like anyone entitled to be called Sir Samurai. He tried to walk on. "You there, Sir Samurai, please stop a moment. I have a small favor to ask." There could no longer be any doubt that the voice meant him. He stopped and, without turning around, answered lazily over his shoulder.
"Ha?"
Only then did he swing his head toward the voice, and what an extraordinary face it was. How had such a peculiar face ever come into being? They say Yuga Liang's face measured 1 foot and 2 inches from top to bottom, but this one could hardly have been shorter. His eyes, nose, and mouth had all been pushed up toward his hairline and crowded together there, while an enormous jaw hung below them like a bottle gourd dangling from a garden trellis. From the lower lip downward it must have measured nearly 4 inches, comfortably more than half the area of his face belonged to his jaw. Far from tapering toward the bottom, it grew fuller and more ponderous as it descended. The whole effect was hopeless. He strode about cutting the wind with that prodigious jaw, and no passerby could help staring. During his time in the Kofu garrison, no one called him Ago Juro behind his back. They called him the Jaw or Ago Juro, Juro of the Jaw. Not that anyone possessed the courage to say so to his face. One fellow retainer once happened to scratch his own chin in Ago Juro's presence. Ago Juro drew on him without warning and nearly killed him. Another man appeared before him with a medicinal plaster on his chin. Ago Juro seized him by the collar, dragged him around, and finally hurled him into a drainage ditch. In Ago Juro's presence, not only the word jaw but any gesture that might call a jaw to mind was strictly forbidden. He turned that remarkable countenance toward the trees. Beside a moss-covered stone shrine known as the seat of Yawata, an emaciated wandering monk, almost 80 years old, sat meditating upon the fallen leaves with his eyes half closed. A long white beard hung from his chin like a priest's fly whisk. Ago Juro crunched through the dead leaves into the forest. He remained standing and, without taking his hands fully from his robe, reached out with his fingertips to pinch the heavy end of his jaw.
Reverend, was it you who called me just now?
Yes. Indeed it was.
Ahem. You have a wicked sense of humor, Reverend. Do I look like a samurai to you?
What else should I call you?
I'm no byuk, no proper samurai. In Japanese, remove the two little marks that turn fu into bu, and byuk becomes fuk, a wandering mendicant. That is nearer the mark for me.
Oh, surely not. Surely not.
I suppose austerities are usually much like this. Even so, sit here much longer and the cold will give you a stomach complaint. What vow made you plant yourself in a place like this?
I have been waiting here for you.
For me? Well, that is astonishing. I was born a vagabond. When the impulse takes me, I go east or west according to that day's wind. I hardly know myself which way my feet will carry me. How could you know I would pass this spot?
The old monk stroked his long beard.
It was ordained before either of us was born that on this day of this month, at the hour of the monkey, you would pass this place. Neither of us can escape the bond of fate that brings us together.
Good heavens!
I have fasted here since the 17th day of last month while waiting for you. Today is the 21st day, the day on which my vigil is fulfilled. This, too, is a bond of the Buddha. It is no light matter.
The old monk's eyes opened wide. He fixed Ago Juro's face with an unwavering stare and murmured,
Ah! Just as I thought.
His eyes were gentle enough to be called compassionate, yet a fierce radiance shone from their depths and seemed to pierce Ago Juro's own eyes. Ago Juro was not a man easily startled, but the light was so dazzling that he could not look back squarely. He hunched his shoulders despite himself.
Reverend, those are formidable eyes of yours. They are too bright for me. Kindly look somewhere else.
The old monk nodded repeatedly, plainly satisfied.
The longer I look, the more clearly I see the face of a man both wise and resourceful. Those eyes of a sleeping phoenix, with white light in their depths, mark a man who meets change without confusion, a gaze found in only one person in 10,000. Your brow is clear and your lower face has an air of generous strength. Here indeed is a genius of the rarest kind. My waiting has not been in vain.
Ago Juro flushed with embarrassment and rubbed the back of his neck.
Well, now. I am grateful for the praise, but I am nothing of the sort. I was born a fool and blunder at everything. This time, for example, I was escorting the Kofu treasury shipment to Edo when I suddenly grew sick of the business. I left the pack horses and their money standing on Sasego Pass and went off to amuse myself in Kazusa. That is hardly the conduct of a wise and resourceful man.
He bent his lanky frame toward the monk.
Still, no man is angered by praise. I know perfectly well I am being flattered, but I shall take the bait. Why have you waited 21 days without food or drink for me?
The truth is, I have a most difficult favor to ask.
Ask away. I have no money, but I possess more free time than I can use. In return for all that praise, I shall undertake anything within my powers. I have a taste for mad adventures besides. Now, what is this favor?
If you carry this task through, you can prevent the country from falling into disorder.
Ago Juro chuckled. That is a sizable claim. I am to save the country from disorder? Splendid. You have my word. Now then, tell me the path I am to follow.
I am grateful that you consented so readily. Now I can close my eyes in peace.
No need for thanks. It is the layman's duty to save a man of religion. Another bond of the Buddha, no doubt.
The monk laughed. You say amusing things. Very well, I shall explain. But this is a momentous secret of state and must not be overheard. Please see whether anyone is nearby.
An easy enough errand.
Ago Juro left the trees and surveyed the road. A thin evening haze had descended, and not a figure could be seen in either direction. For good measure he searched the forest as well, then returned.
There is no one.
Then come a little closer. I shall reveal a secret of state known to only 4 people in the world.
I see, I see.
The heir of the 12th shogun, Lord Ieyoshi, the child called Seinasuke, now Lord Iesoda, commander of the right, was born to Lady Honjuin in the Honmaru Palace of Edo Castle on the 14th day of the 4th month of Bunsei 7. But about half an hour later, another child was born. They were twins.
What?
Your surprise is natural. Only 4 people know that the present shogun has a twin brother, Lady Honjuin, Lord Ieyoshi, the midwife Aozora, and myself. 3 serving women were also in the birthing chamber. Regrettably, to preserve the secret, their deaths had to be made to appear the result of illness.
And what became of the other shogun?
That is what I shall now tell you. Twins born as heirs to a realm are the seed of civil war. Which is elder and which younger is not easily settled. If, once they had grown, one were named heir, the other would inevitably resent it. He might insist that he himself was the firstborn, gather supporters, ally himself with a mighty domain, and plot rebellion. That would be a national catastrophe, and it has happened before. If the root was to be cut, it had to be cut at once. Lord Ieyoshi wished to have the child killed with a single stroke. Lady Honjuin's anguished pleas stayed his hand. They agreed instead that when the boy reached 10 he would be made a monk and left to pass his life in ignorance at a ruined temple deep in the countryside. The child was entrusted to Aozora, an upright woman ideally suited to the duty.
Indeed.
She concealed the infant inside her robe, slipped through the Fukiage garden, left by the Sakashita gate, and returned to her home in Konyacho, Kanda. She named him Sutezo and raised him with great care. In the spring of his 8th year, she revealed the truth to a distant relative of hers, a monk named Yodo at Manenji Temple in Ono village, Kusatsu, and entrusted Sutezo to him.
And that Yodo is you?
Indeed. When he reached 10 and I tried to shave his head, he fled the temple rather than become a monk. That was exactly 14 years ago. I became a wandering priest and searched every corner of the country, but I could never find him. This spring I returned to Kusatsu to see the temple once more. A letter marked with a red slip was waiting for me. It came from Kuguro, Aozora's landlord.
Aha! Now the affair begins.
The letter said that on the evening of the 2nd day of the 5th month, a groan was heard from Aozora's house. When Kuguro entered, he found her cut down. He hurried to tend her, but she said, "Never mind me. Inside this envelope are 3 written characters. Attach a red slip to it and send it to the address upon it." Then she died. The landlord took the envelope and was about to leave the alley for a courier house when 2 assailants sprang at him at once, one from either side, and seized it. As he fought them off, the envelope tore into 3 pieces. The assailants escaped with 2, and he barely managed to retain the 3rd.
That is a calamity.
Kuguro wrote that he was ashamed to have made such a mess of a dying woman's request. The encounter took place in darkness, so he had not seen the villains' faces and had no hope of recovering what they stole. He was therefore sending the 1 piece left in his hands, in the hope that it might be of some use.
What was written on it?
When I opened it, I found the end torn from a narrow strip of paper. Only the character 5 remained. Since Aozora sent it to me, it must indicate the name of the place where Lord Sutezo lives. The name consisted of 3 characters. I searched everywhere, from Gokasho in Omi and Mount Gohosen to Lake Gorigata and Itsukaichi in Musasha. At last I heard of a small village called Isotsuki, beyond Mama here in Shimosa. I went there on the 15th day of last month, but he was not there either. I know that my life will end at the hour of the dog on the day of the dog this 10th month. There is nothing more I can accomplish by my own strength. As I still had 21 days to live, I resolved to sit beside the road, study the faces of passing travelers, and entrust the task to the person I judged worthy. That is why I have been fasting here.
Even so, if villains attacked Osawa, someone must have discovered the secret of the twins. They intend to find this Lord Tsutezo and use him in some scheme.
The monk Yodo nodded.
What puzzles me is the former chief's senior counselor, Mizuno Ekison. Despite the disastrous policies that cost him his office, less than 10 months later he was restored to it at the shogun's personal command. No one but Lord Yayoshi knows why. It is most suspicious. My conjecture may be wrong, but perhaps the treacherous Mizuno recently learned the secret of the twins and used it to force his lordship to restore him. If matters are as I suspect, and Mizuno finds Lord Tsutezo first and takes him under his control, there is no telling what desperate thing he may attempt. This is what I ask of you: find Lord Tsutezo before Mizuno does and give him this letter. I have written that burning with ambition for a destiny never granted him will only destroy him. He must not let the empty cravings of this world lead him astray, but enter the Buddhist order without delay and live out his natural span in peace. Here is a portrait of Lord Tsutezo as well. I beg you to do this. I understand. I am to find Lord Tsutezo, give him this letter, and tell him to become a monk as soon as possible. Consider it done. And what will you do now?
I shall die here before long. Pay no attention to me.
I would stay until you close your eyes and recite a prayer for you, but to say so to a man as fully prepared as you would only be presumptuous. Reverend, may you meet a peaceful death.
If fate permits, perhaps we shall meet again in the next world.
Don't joke. Whether you like it or not, you are bound for paradise. As for me, there is no telling where I'll end up. This is our final farewell, in this world and the next. Goodbye.
With one quick bow, he disappeared into the evening haze along the highway, his cheap straw sandals slapping against the road.
The woman suspended in midair.
Intending to reach Senju that same night, Ago Juro took the dark road toward Konadai. To his right lay the grounds of Soneji Temple, to his left, the famous cliffs of Konadai. Below them, the waters of the Tone River swirled past. Near Kanagafuchi, he saw about 5 figures about 100 yards ahead, leaning out over the abyss. One after another, they called down in hushed voices. From below came a calm, clear woman's voice, answering every word. Wondering what they were doing, Ago Juro put a hand to the cliff's edge and looked diagonally down toward the voice. He could not suppress an exclamation. River mist filled the gorge and veiled the moon. Yet the newly risen moon cast a pallid beam across the cliff face, revealing one spot with startling clarity. A woman, bound round and round like a bagworm, hung swaying from a single rope against a sheer cliff nearly 60 feet high. The woman dangling from that one rope was the person who had been speaking so calmly. She was saying,
"If you mean to kill me, then do it. Nothing could be easier. You need only cut this rope clean through. Bound as tightly as I am, in a current this violent, I can only drown."
From above came a low, stifled voice.
"No one has said anything about killing you. Tell us the one thing we want to know, and we shall save you."
The voice was low, but it echoed through the deep gorge, and every last word reached Ago Juro distinctly. Below, the woman gave a soft, defiant laugh.
"What was that? You'll save me if I confess? Don't make me laugh. Do you think I would fall for such a sweet promise?"
Another voice answered from above.
"No, we swear we shall save you. One word is all we ask. Speak quickly."
That voice, isn't it Muragaki, the Anawanban? An Anawanban is a secret agent under the shogun's direct command. You crouch beside the palanquin platform on the veranda of the Fukiage Palace and clear your throat once, just once, and the shogun himself comes out alone. After dismissing everyone else, he listens to your confidential report, whether accusations slipped into the petition box are true, how lords outside the Tokugawa family govern their distant domains, and even what feuds are troubling their houses. The affairs of the whole realm are laid out as plainly as if they rested in the palm of the shogun's hand, all through the work of the Anawanban. Isn't that right? If you are told to investigate Tosa, you do not even stop at home, you leave for Tosa on the spot. When your father, Lord Muragaki Awaji, went to investigate Satsuma, he departed straight from the garden and did not return for 25 years. For duty, and to keep a secret, an Anawanban will kill his own parents, siblings, or children. If necessary, he will maim himself and pose as a one-armed man or someone unable to walk. And now 6 such terrifying men stand above me with their arms folded. Even if I told you the truth, there is no reason you would let a woman who knows a secret this great live. Isn't that so, Muragaki? If I am to be killed whether I speak or remain silent, then I shall say nothing. I shall carry this secret in my breast to the grave. If you intend to kill me in any case, hurry and cut the rope. I am thoroughly tired of dangling here. Well, Muragaki?
The 6 men crouched at the cliff's edge and appeared to confer. Before long, one rose, strode to the very brink, and called down.
Yae! Are you truly determined to die?
The woman below laughed softly again.
Yes, I am. Please, kill me. You are not the only ones who can play the loyal servant. You serve the shogun, we serve Lady Honjoin of the Inner Chambers. She has 50, 100 attendants ready to risk their lives. Kill me if you wish. The instant I die, another will take my place. If she fails, there will be another after her. We have no shortage of women. I almost feel sorry for you.
That is all we needed to hear. Since you have been prowling around this area, we now know roughly where to look. I regret it, but we shall cut the rope.
How tiresome. You boast that you know where to look, but you will never discover where that person is. Try your very best. I shall be eager to see what you can.
Her last word turned into a cry. Trailing the long severed rope behind her, her body dropped like a stone. Good grief, Ago Juro muttered, tucking in his prodigious chin as best he could.
They certainly live up to their name as secret agents. That was decisive work, clean as you please. More to the point, from what I just heard, there was a good deal of suspiciously grand talk mixed in. As Reverend Yudo said, one cannot escape a bond ordained by the Buddha. I never expected the blessing to arrive so soon. I shall pull that woman from the river downstream and see if I can coax the truth out of her.
He hitched up the hem of his worn-lined kimono, bared his shins, and ran downstream along the cliff edge. This had been the site of Ota's castle in the Ashikaga period, and traces of its keep platforms and ancient burial mounds still remained here and there. Ago Juro ran through the old ruins until he reached 150 steep steps cut directly into the rock, descending all the way to the water. At their foot stood an ancient well called the Well of the Arhats. He flew down the steep steps and crouched on a rock beside the well. By the faint moonlight, he fixed his eyes on the water upstream. Presently the woman came drifting toward him, tossed by the violent current, now rising to the surface, now sinking beneath it.
The woman's request.
He pushed a great rotten Zelkova log from the shore into the current, sprang lightly upon it, and caught the drifting woman by the back of her collar. He drew her ashore, propped her against a breakwater stake, sat on a wicker flood barrier packed with stones, and leisurely smoked a pipe.
That settles the first part. Now all I have to do is make her cough up the water.
Speaking as though he had not a care in the world, he studied the woman's face as she lay with her eyes closed and turned toward the pale moon. She might have been 20, but certainly not yet 21. Her long oval face had clean, decisive features. She wore a crepe kimono and a purple satin sash tied in a tall, arrow-like knot. A long white ribbon adorned her swept-up hair. She had hitched her hem neatly above white gaiters and straw sandals.
Now this is something. I never saw a woman with such fine features back in Kofu. She can only just have turned 20, yet she hurled all that abuse while hanging from a cliff. Not many girls her age could manage that. With that placid face she looks like cannon calming the waves, and still she has such a venomous tongue. Women are frightening creatures. But I cannot leave her like this forever. Time to make her cough up the water.
He knocked the ash from his pipe, dropped the tobacco pouch into his sleeve, and rose with a grunt. Seizing her collar as though hauling a whale, he dragged her up onto the gravel. He pulled open the neck of her kimono and reached a hand inside toward her chest.
Still warm. She'll be all right. She must have lost consciousness on the way down, and luckily she has swallowed very little water.
He swiftly undid the ropes wound around her, turned her face down, and made her expel the water. Then he gathered dry branches and reeds from the riverbank and built a fire. As he tended her, she seemed at last to regain consciousness and began faintly moving her hands and feet.
Oh. Back among the living, are you?
Putting a hand on her shoulder, he shook her roughly.
Miss. Are you awake?
The woman released a long sigh, opened her eyes groggily, and looked about in bewilderment.
Was it you who just spoke? What in the world has happened to me?
What happened? You were thrown into Kanagafuchi and nearly became a floating corpse. I barely managed to save you.
The woman opened her eyes wide. Oh.
You saved me?
You do go on. If I had not saved you, you would be drifting somewhere off Kyotoku by now with sardines nibbling at your backside.
What an amusing man. Most people cannot joke like that after saving someone's life. Don't just stand there. Come and warm yourself by the fire.
Ago Juro, thoroughly disarmed, crouched beside the flames in a daze. The woman straightened her skirts, then settled herself gracefully on one hip and held her hands out to the fire.
Shall I tell you the truth? I actually regained consciousness a little earlier. I wanted to see what you would do, so I quietly watched you.
Then you knew I was warming your feet and chest?
Yes, I knew. How very kind of you.
Well, that is a surprise. They say people in Edo are sly, and now I see it is true.
But a woman alone with a man on a riverbank like this, when she has no idea what he might do, surely she has reason to be afraid.
Put. Don't be absurd. Can anything frighten a woman who hung from a 60-foot cliff and talked as boldly as you did?
Oh, how awful. You heard all that? Then it is too late for me to pretend to be meek now.
You have teased me enough. I am in a hurry, and I have no time to dally with you.
He made an exaggerated show of rising. The woman caught him by the hand.
If you leave me alone here and a wolf eats me, what will you do then? You would save my body only to abandon the life you restored. Besides, I have a rather serious favor to ask.
Ago Juro scratched his head.
Now you have me in a bind. What sort of favor is it? I am pressed for time, so make it quick.
That sounds like a Kofu accent. Have you come from that part of the country?
I am the son of a country samurai from Kofu. This is my first journey to Edo. More importantly, what crime brought such a terrible punishment upon you?
My name is Yae. I attend a lady of the inner chambers called Lady Honjaween. Merely because I know of the wicked deeds of a certain chief senior counselor, all manner of men are trying to kill me. You saw it yourself, a whole band of men did that terrible thing to one helpless woman. Don't you feel sorry for me?
Well, yes. I suppose I do.
Won't you lend me your strength and help me?
Depending on what it is, I might. What exactly do you want me to do?
Yae placed a hand on Ago Juro's knee.
It is only a small thing. There is a petition box in a waiting area at the Court of Inquiry in Tatsunokuchi, Edo. I want you to bring it to me.
Successive shoguns had used the petition box to learn the true condition of the people. It received candid secret accusations about the conduct of senior councillors and the misconduct or failed policies of town magistrates, inspectors, and provincial governors. When the box was taken into the inner citadel, 6 inspectors escorted it to the senior councillor's offices. A senior councillor then handed it into a strict chain of custody, first to the attendant assigned to those offices, next to the attendant in the clock room, and finally to the chamberlain who conveyed business to the shogun. After dismissing everyone, the shogun took the key from an amulet pouch around his neck and opened the box himself. Security was so strict that opening it without authority was punishable by death. And she had just asked him to fetch it as though it were nothing. Ago Juro was not easily intimidated, but even he was somewhat startled. Marveling that such formidable women existed in the world, he stared blankly at Yae's face.
So I only have to bring you the box? That does not sound too difficult. Is it very heavy?
Oh, honestly. I do not care about the box. I only want the letter inside it.
Very well, I understand. Where shall I take the letter?
Bring it beneath the bell tower of Yushima Tenjin at the 6th bell, the day after tomorrow.
Understood.
You truly are kind.
Well, it was nothing much.
The petition box.
Edo, after an absence of 2 years. With his hands tucked into his kimono, Ago Juro sauntered into the servants' quarters at Wakisaka's residence. A man wiping his feet at the raised threshold happened to look up. When he saw Ago Juro, he leaped into the air with a shout.
Master, when did you get back?
This very moment. The wind in Kofu was too fierce. A delicate fellow like me could not endure it. I shall be imposing on you again for a while.
Ever since you left, Master, we have been miserable, longing for you to come back from Kofu. Hey, everyone, the Master is back. Come quickly.
Palanquin bearers and household footmen came rushing from the back rooms.
Welcome home, Master.
They made a tremendous commotion and nearly carried him bodily into the house. At about the 7th bell the following morning, Ago Juro sauntered out of Wakisaka's quarters in disguise. He wore an Iwatsuka-dyed cotton kimono striped in the style favored by procurers and a plain brown cotton jacket. A white silk scarf was wrapped tightly around his long chin. In patterned straw sandals, with a scuffed leather tobacco pouch at his waist, he looked every inch a country legal fixer.
I do not know the whole story, but whatever it is, the answer lies inside that petition box. Stealing the shogun's petition box from the court of inquiry is rather difficult to justify, but if it is to prevent disorder in the realm, it cannot be helped. There is nothing for it but to try.
Muttering to himself, he reached the moat and entered Wadakura Gate. The residence of the town magistrate stood directly ahead. To its right was the court of inquiry. It was an august office where the senior councillors and the 3 magistrates deliberated upon affairs of state and heard civil cases. 3 guards stood by a small gate to the left of the grand entrance to the assembly hall. They gave Ago Juro's clothes a sharp glance.
A provincial lawsuit?
Yes, sir.
Has your petition been submitted?
Yes, sir.
Is it a group grievance or a money claim?
A collective claim, sir.
Then go to the western waiting area.
Thank you, sir.
After following a gravel path for some distance, he reached a waiting area where numerous litigation agents sat on benches, awaiting their summons. At the far end was the entrance to the courtroom. Beside the wall, in one corner of the raised entrance platform, stood the petition box. It was a stout cypress box reinforced with black iron fittings, about the size of 5 stacked food boxes. Ago Juro walked toward the raised platform, politely greeting the men on the benches. Then he spread a much-patched cotton wrapping cloth upon it and began, with perfect leisure, to wrap the petition box. No one could imagine a fool bold enough to carry off the petition box of the realm. 4 or 5 litigation agents merely watched in bewilderment, wondering what he meant to do. Ago Juro finished wrapping the box, lifted it in his right hand, called, "Beg pardon, gentlemen," and walked out of the waiting area. Only after he had gone a considerable distance did they understand. 2 or 3 men sprang from their benches.
Thief! The scoundrel! Stop! Stop there!
Kicking gravel behind them, they came racing after him in a disorderly pack.
Go to hell! I'm not stopping for anyone.
Ago Juro ran toward the small gate, shouting "Thief! Thief!" as loudly as his pursuers.
Guards! Guards! A thief just ran that way.
The guards, who had been playing shogi in their lodge, rushed out in alarm, still clutching the pieces in their hands.
Here! What is all this commotion?
Ago Juro said between gasps.
A thief! A robber just escaped. Nonsense! No one could have passed us. Passed or not, look, there he goes.
Shouting, "Stop! Stop that thief!" he dashed through the gate. Instead of heading toward Wadakura Gate, he followed the wall of the town magistrate's residence and ran toward Sakashita Gate. When he glanced back, he saw guards, constables, and litigation agents coming after him in one roaring mass. Whichever way he fled, he was still inside the moat. He tried running beneath Momijiyama toward Hanzaman Gate, but at this rate he was certain to be caught there.
Whatever happens, happens. I shall hide inside the western enclosure.
Fortunately, no one was nearby. He grabbed hold of the azalea-covered slope of Momijiyama and scrambled blindly upward. He came over the top beside the mausoleum grounds. Beyond an artificial hill he could see the roof of the archives. Ago Juro sat down heavily with his legs crossed at the foot of an old maple.
I am safe this far. First, someone must report that a suspicious man has entered the western enclosure. The report must go to the superintendent, then to the assistant magistrate, and from the assistant magistrate to the Fukiage magistrate. By the time they follow every step, it will be pitch dark. That is how these things work. Well then, I had better start breaking open the box.
He took a fine-toothed saw about 6 inches long from inside his kimono and began sawing through the slot for petitions. When he thrust a hand through the opening he had cut, he found 5 petitions inside. He carefully opened each seal and read them one by one. When his eyes reached the final petition, the 5th, he exclaimed,
Good grief!
He drew his head down between his shoulders. This is a shameful matter to confess, but I am a man who was cast aside by a woman named Yare, formerly an attendant to Lady Honjoin. Unable to forget my grievance, I submit this secret accusation in order to avenge myself, revealing the rebellion plotted by Yare and her associates. The conspirators are Mizuno Eshin no Kami, the chief senior counselor, Torii Kai no Kami, who holds the offices of town magistrate and finance magistrate, Matsudaira Mimasaka no Kami subordinate Shibukawa Rakuzo, an apprentice astronomer who also serves as magistrate of books, Honjo Moheiji, a retainer of Kai no Kami, Go to Seimon, an assayer at the Gold Mint, Lady Asano of Honjo Inn, who was officially declared dead of illness and secretly released from service after the incident at Nakayama Hokkekyoji, and Yare, her personal attendant. They pretended to know the whereabouts of Lord Suteizo, Lord Ieyasoda's elder twin brother. On the strength of that claim, Mizuno pressured his lordship into restoring him to office. In truth, they know no such thing. All they possess is a slip bearing the single character, Great. Yae took it in the 9th month of the previous year when she attacked a woman named Aozora in Konyucho, Kanda, and the character is one of the clues to Lord Suteizo's whereabouts. Indeed, Yae went to the vicinity of Konadai yesterday to search for him. This alone proves that the conspirators still do not know where Lord Suteizo is. Since the end of last year, Torii Kainokami has secretly ordered his informers and their assistants to search everywhere, but they appear to have found no reliable clue. Such are the true circumstances. I have further heard that Mizuno's faction intends to find Lord Suteizo, set him up as its figurehead, and force the establishment of a new branch of the shogunal house. By that means they plan to enlarge their own power and, at the same time, use him as an instrument to overthrow Abe Izno-kami. This concludes my report.
The Shogun.
Clever as she is still a woman. She made the mistake of taking me for a complete country bumpkin. She must have guessed that the lover she cast aside would eventually strike back. A woman cannot enter the court of inquiry, so she used a drifter like me to do the job. As it happens, she has handed me an unexpected stroke of luck. When I meet her at Yashima Tenjin tomorrow, I shall thank her warmly. And Reverend Yudo truly was a remarkable monk. By now he has probably met his peaceful end in Shirazunomori, yet he saw straight through Mizuno without ever leaving that spot. I now have the two characters 5 and Great. Only one remains. Whose hands can it be in? There is no use rushing, sooner or later I shall track it down. And since I have stumbled into the Fukiichi Palace, where no common servant has ever set foot, I might as well look around.
He tucked the 5 petitions into the money belt around his waist and strolled among the maples toward the artificial hill. Beyond the grove at the foot of the hill lay a broad lawn, and beyond that, rice fields. 2 small hills faced each other to the north and south of the fields.
So those must be the famous Tokasayama and Janishiyama. It looks exactly like a mountain village. I would never have imagined such a place within the castle walls. Remarkable.
He followed the edge of the great lawn toward the foot of Tokusayama. Towering crags and strangely contorted walls of rock rose there, with a waterfall more than 20 feet high spilling over them. The stream wound slowly through groves and bamboo thickets before emptying into a broad pond. On the hillsides around the pond, pavilions and tea houses appeared and disappeared among the trees. Along the western shore spread a vast flower garden where autumn plants of every color bloomed in dazzling profusion. Ago Juro was staring in astonishment when he heard footsteps on the tree-lined path opposite the flower garden.
Oh, this is bad. If they catch me in a place like this, I could have a dozen heads and still lose them all. Is there nowhere to hide?
The view was open in every direction, with no obvious hiding place. Then he noticed an enormous old pine, thick enough for 2 men to encircle, rising in the garden of a nearby rustic tea house.
There is nothing else for it. I shall have to hide among the branches of that pine.
He ran to the tree, seized the trunk, and climbed swiftly. Concealed in the dense foliage halfway up, he had just sighed with relief when the wicket opened and a man of 35 or 36 entered quietly. His eyes were sharp and resolute. The man wore a Matsuzaka cotton kimono without formal trousers and a plain brown cotton hari. He had the build of a samurai but the dress of a small merchant from the lower town. As Ago Juro watched this peculiar visitor, the man knelt with both hands on the ground before the veranda of the tea house. He raised his right hand to his mouth and cleared his throat softly twice. After a while, a paper screen slid open, and a man of 51 or 52 with a broad, easy air stepped onto the veranda. He too wore an informal kimono. With his hands tucked inside it, he said,
"Ah, Muragaki, what has become of that matter? Have you still not found the place?"
The man called Muragaki bowed reverently.
I beg your lordship to grant me a little more time. At Kanadai we cornered a woman named Yae, servant to Lady Asano, of whom I spoke before. We questioned her by every means at our disposal, but she would confess nothing. To prevent future trouble, we threw her into Kanagafuchi to drown her.
Then you have lost your lead.
There is no cause for concern. Soon afterward, Yae was pulled from the river by a man who looked like a country samurai, and she returned safely to Edo.
Indeed.
Yae believes that we think her dead. She will therefore move more freely than before. If we keep watch on her, she will inevitably reveal the place. Because she was prowling near Kanadai, we believe it must lie somewhere in that vicinity, within a triangle bounded by Kawaguchi to the north, Ichikawa to the east, and Senju to the south.
Is there a place within it whose name contains the character 4 deer?
Regrettably, no. I do not think the character 4 deer is meant literally. It is there to supply a sound. It may give ka, the opening syllable of Kanoko, a fawn, or sure, as in the place name Shishigatani. That, at least, is my humble conclusion.
That may well be so. In any event, find the place as soon as possible. Though the poor man deserves pity, deal with him exactly as arranged. Otherwise we cannot restrain that treacherous Mizuno. Because no one knows why he was restored, there is said to be much speculation not only within the council but throughout the city. I, for one, will not endure Mizuno's pressure for another day. It is intolerable.
I understand your lordship's feelings completely. Without fail.
I am counting on you.
The man with the broad, easy air withdrew into the tea house. Muragaki remained bowed low to the ground, both hands before him, motionless for a long while. Up in the pine, Ago Juro thought.
Hurry up and leave. I cannot climb down while you stand there. If you must weep, go and do it somewhere else.
At last Muragaki brushed the soil from his knees, rose, and walked away toward the tree-lined path with his face lowered. Ago Juro carefully descended from the pine, circled the edge of the pond, and slipped into a bamboo thicket. There he sat cross-legged once more.
I have done nothing, yet the spring wind has carried everything to me. I learned the last character and am even told how to read it. It could not be easier. The 3 characters Osawa wrote were 5, great, and dear. Dear gives ka, the opening syllable of Kanoko, a fawn. Then 5 must give sa, from Satsuki, the 5th month. Simple enough. By the same method, great might give o, from Ototo, minister, or you, from Ashi, nobleman. Sauka makes no sense, so it must be you, Asayuka, Sauka. In the old spelling, that is Soka. Ha! Of course.
The Drooler.
An inner room at Kabayan, a restaurant in Yushima. A sprig of red plum stood in a vase upon a pillar. Below it, Ago Juro stared blankly with his eyes wide and drool running from one corner of his mouth. Facing him across a rosewood dining table sat Yare, the woman from Kanagafuchi, smiling broadly. She rested an elbow upon one raised knee and propped her chin in her palm, regarding him with an expression of profound contempt.
Well, Mr. Ja, or Sen, the first syllable of Senba, if you prefer. You knew everything, and still you pretended innocence so you could toy with me. But it will not work. While you were at the bath, I read Reverend Udoa's letter. Now I know which character you had, how the monk had meddled, and everything else. Once I obtained the character 5, the game was mine. I know exactly where Lord Sutezo is, so I shall go on ahead. I almost feel sorry for doing this to a man on his first visit to Edo, but let it teach you not to meddle in matters beyond your station. Do you understand? If fate permits, perhaps we shall meet again. When the numbness leaves your hands and feet, be sure to wipe away the drool. I am leaving now. Is that clear? Goodbye.
BBBEA.
You want to call me a beast, I suppose. Do not hurry. You can say it at your leisure later.
Having said everything she wished, Yae stuck out her red tongue and slipped from the little room. The numbing drug had robbed Ago Juro of his hands and feet, but not his mind. His frustration made his insides boil, yet the muscles of his jaw were numb as well, and he could not even grind his teeth. Roughly 2 hours passed. At last his limbs began to move little by little. Half crawling, he reached the front desk and had them hire a fast relay palanquin with a man towing it in front and extra bearers pushing from behind. He tumbled inside and, his tongue still hopelessly tangled, said,
So-ka.
Hey, the gentleman keeps saying, so-ka. Why does he keep saying, I see?
So-ka.
He means he wants to go to so-ka.
Yes, that's it. Go, fast. I'll pay, whatever it costs.
Hear that, partner? He'll give us a handsome tip. We run flat out. Right you are.
One man took the tow rope, 3 shouldered the palanquin in relays, and 2 more pressed upon the rear pole.
Heave ho! Heave ho!
They flew down the road like a single black cloud. They raced from Kitasenju to Arai, changing bearers at every stage. Presently one of the men on the rear pole called out in a shrill voice.
Sir, there is something strange. An express palanquin has been following us for some time. Is it with your party?
Ago Juro started in surprise.
And no. Nothing of the kind. Where did that express palanquin begin following us?
As soon as our palanquin left the corner by Kobayan, it fell in behind us and has stayed there ever since.
Did you see the passenger's face?
Certainly, a magnificent beauty, with her hair swept high and her sash tied in an upright arrow shape.
Damn her. It's Yae. Of course, now that I think about it, she could not possibly know the character Muragaki has. She made me swallow the numbing drug, prepared an express palanquin while I was helpless, and guessed that as soon as the numbness wore off I would dash out blindly. She has been waiting at the corner of Kobayan all this time. I have never been made such a fool of in my life.
Sir, there is another strange thing. A second express palanquin is following the woman's.
What? Where did that one join us?
At the corner of Kobayan as well.
What did its passenger look like?
Hollow-cheeked. He might have been a samurai, or perhaps a shop clerk.
TCH. That scoundrel Muragaki. So I am leading Yae all the way to Soka, and Yae is leading Muragaki there in our wake. Which makes me the greatest fool of all. Damn it! In that case, I have a plan of my own.
He called loudly to the palanquin bearers.
Listen. I have my reasons. Near the embankment ahead, I shall tumble out of the palanquin. You turn onto a side road and race toward Kazusa by any route you please. We have to shake those people behind us. I shall leave 10 Rio on this cushion for the fare and your reward. I am counting on you.
Very good, sir. Leave it to us.
As they reached the Nishirai embankment, Ago Juro gathered his strength and sprang from the palanquin. He rolled down the slope toward the rice fields. Lord Sotezo was running a small temple school on the outskirts of Soka. There had been no profound reason for his flight from Menenji. He had merely wanted to see the bustle of Edo he had heard so much about. At 20, he and Okimi, the daughter of a kimono merchant, fell in love and eloped to Soka. Poor though they were, they had lived there in peace. Lord Tsutezo could not readily bring himself to shave his head, but 2 months after Ago Juro found him, he entered Rennoji Temple in Uyeno. Not long afterward, Mizuno fell from power, never to rise again.
The Japanese Mystery Library. Classic mysteries from Japan in English. Subscribe to hear the next story.